Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse, the Tuesday, April 29th edition of the Daily Pulse. I'm your host, Teddy Panos, coming to you from the WellPoint Studios here in beautiful downtown Lowell. And you're probably sick of me doing my Trigger 'Em Tuesday podcast by myself. So instead, we're going to bring in some help.
Sidekick.
I want some help to help trigger him.
I'm there. I'm down for a fight. Let's do it.
Love it. Joined in studios by Melanie Gilbert from the Lowell Sun. Melanie, great to have you here.
Always
Welcome
good to be
back.
here. Thank you.
I see we've broken out the spring wardrobe.
Thank you for noticing.
Yes.
I figure if I'm going to be affected by pollen, I might as well wear. I don't know if this is going to be like, an omen to keep the pollen away. But
I'm surrounded by flowery outfits out the chamber office out there. They're all got their spring gear on. Me, I've got my dark shirt
I
on.
actually like your shirt.
It's slimming.
I like
they
it.
say black is slimming. So
I wear a lot of black, Teddy.
For what? For what? Are you trying to disappear?
Yeah. Oh, well, that's very gracious. But right around Christmas, I eat whatever I feel like. Because you get the Christmas baskets and the chocolate.
It's
and
Christmas every day
and the
for
liquor.
me. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I can't help you there. Then.
But it is short sleeves. So
it's very nice.
It's beautiful out there today.
I gotta, get rid of that Christmas chocolate weight.
You skinny people really tick me off.
I'm sorry.
When you play the heavy person. Well, we got a lot to talk about. The Sunday column had my blood boiling.
Oh, no. In a good way or a bad way?
Well, in both. I like blood boiling is a good thing on a Sunday morning.
Peter's part is what had your blood boiling.
Peter's part, definitely. You played a small part a little bit, though, and I want to talk about all of it, plus a couple of other things happening in the city. Lots happening in the city of Lowell, and you, of course, as the point person at the Lowell Sun for the city of Lowell, you are the one to talk to.
The one to hit, the one to, metaphorically.
You're the one we're going after. Just kidding. We'll talk to Melanie in a quick second. Just let me thank my Daily Pulse sponsors right now. Ray Booten, licensed realtor, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, certified appraiser in both of those states as well. He also, his Karen Reed trial watching is done for free. That is not his profession, but he's more than happy to give you his assessment on that as well. But if you are looking to buy or sell a home, a business, or a commercial property, Ray Booten's your man. He's the call you need to make. You can find him online at realestaterayBooten.com. Thanks as well to our friends at WellPoint. WellPoint, the only health plan offering healthcare benefits exclusively to Massachusetts GIC members. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. And I remind you again, that clock is ticking. Today we told you it's Tuesday, April 29th. Thursday, May 1st is the last day to switch your insurance plan. It's open enrollment period in the Massachusetts GIC, Group Insurance Commission. So if you're not happy with your plan, check out WellPoint. Find out why they are the leader in the state in GIC coverage. 2 hints for you. No referrals needed. No primary care physician required. 2 important differences between WellPoint and everybody else. That
is a huge distinction with the difference. I got to tell you,
it's hard to find a primary care physician.
No, it is, and that sort of metric was very common with the HAPs, not the HAP, the company, the group health plans back in the early 90s, that you had to get it because they were trying to contain costs.
Correct.
So you had to get a referral and it had to be signed and dotted and, all that kind of stuff. And that's limiting in some ways.
Very much so. Very much so.
So good. I mean, insurance is expensive enough.
Yes,
that I want a little autonomy.
Yes, exactly. All right, let's talk about the Sunday column.
And that was not a paid for sponsorship.
No. Well, you're not eligible to switch.
No,
I think
I'm not.
We got Rita Mercier to switch right on this show. Actually.
There you go.
But the column had a couple of different aspects in there, and they were really interesting to me this week. I'll start with what I call the Homeless Chronicles. You've been following this homeless situation in Lowell to the point where you literally have gone down on a couple of occasions now, right, to a couple of different camps.
Oh, I go to all of them.
In the city.
Before I write about them, I go to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you wrote about the kind of breakup of the Sheehy Park one down along the Merrimack River.
I've been tracking that one for a long while. I've been there many times, and many of those people, I'd say there were probably 25 people living there, and I'd say about half were displaced from the Cheyenne camp that they had cleared in September 2023.
That was a couple of years ago. Yeah,
pretty strong mixed Asian population there. So anyway, I go into those. I just went there yesterday. It looks beautiful. I took pictures.
Sheehy Park? Or?
Yeah, the extension where the camp was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I happened to be one day, the state auditor was in town going to the food bank for an event, and as I was driving by, I noticed the Robert Kraft truck and the Lowell Community Health Center vehicle going in there. And so on the way back, I noticed that they were still there, but there was about 10 cruisers there as well. So I went over and grabbed some pictures, and I found out that this was where they start offering them the services.
Right. Well,
they tell them we're coming back to break it up at some point.
Right.
They did a couple of weeks later.
They actually waited 2 extra days from the sign. I think the sign said the 20th.
They really?
And they came the 22nd or something. Yeah.
Do we know how many people were still there when they?
There was nobody when I was there. I was there at 9 o'clock in the morning. They started the action around 6:30, 7 o'clock. So by then they were already gone.
At that point. Okay.
I didn't even have anybody to interview. You know, so it's a very thin story.
Because what I'm trying to figure out is how many people actually took up the offer of service.
That's hard to get at.
People that were there a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I reached out.
You hope somebody did, right?
Yeah, I don't know. You know, we'll find out. The reason I'm sort of honing in on the homeless issue right now is because winter protocol is over. Yep. And winter protocol means that you lose those 25 beds that you had out in Chelmsford at the hotel. It wasn't a Best Western, but something like that.
I think it was a Best Western or a Days Inn or something.
One of those. Actually, really nice place. I went out there too. It's beautiful. And I think they were open for regular business too. But anyway, so those 25 beds are gone, 20 to 25 beds, and the extra cots that they had in the lobby are also gone. So where do those people go? If you had an issue with housing prior to that, and then, so where do those 25 people from that hotel go in addition to the ones from the lobby? And now you've added another 20 to 25 from this camp. There's not enough housing in this city.
You're feeding right into me. Because you brought up
Am I teeing you up?
You brought up the word housing. And this is, so you dubbed the homeless crisis a humanitarian crisis.
Yeah, for the community as well.
And it's not just you. It's all sorts of people are relating it to a housing issue. So let's put aside the Sheehy camp parkside for a minute. But I saw photos, an aerial photo. Was it a drone photo?
John McDonough's
drone photo.
Right.
Of a camp. And there was a big white RV.
Okay, Teddy.
In the middle of it.
Can I just tell you, I have been in every single camp that I've written on. And in almost all those cases, I never felt. I went by myself. I usually go early, before 10 o'clock, before people get busy. And I've never felt unsafe. But I went to that camp. I got to tell you that the hair on the back of my neck, and it was not a friendly. Normally, I just go up to people. I wear my lanyard. I introduce myself. I hand them my card. I make it very clear what I'm doing here. And they usually talk to me. People talk to me. And I don't bribe them with money or cigarettes or anything like that. I just go in. And that was different. I stopped and I said, "Good morning." And they said, "Keep moving."
Interesting.
So, and I thought, oh, you, the fellow who's parked your trailer, your motorhome on public land, state land, I'm to keep moving. And this is along the Bruce Freeman Trail that the city got a $10,000 grant, I believe, to construct. It's not a very long section, but it connects two parts.
You can go all the way out to the central part of the state, I think.
I want to take that bike ride. I know.
I've heard the Chelmsford part is starting to get a little dicey, too, from one of my friends who normally
That doesn't go by the Walmart, does it?
It comes right through Chelmsford Center, and then you actually have to cross a very busy intersection, and then you get back into a secluded, sheltered area. But that is the same trail. But so you mentioned the one camper. Your story in the column actually described 3 campers, trucks, and motorbikes. And this interesting passage here, and I'm going to read it word for word. A truck and several motorbikes drove up the pedestrian path to the white motorhome that is parked on the site and seems to be the camp's center of operations. Now, this doesn't sound like a humanitarian or a housing crisis. People who own RV campers aren't doing so for lack of housing. But if I play along for a minute here, did you happen to notice what those motorbikes and trucks did while they were there? Did they come out and buy with baby diapers? Were they picking up baby diapers?
They weren't advocates.
Or groceries? Were they? What were they doing at that center home? An inquiring mind wants to know.
Well, I will tell you that camp, that encampment, is, to my mind, based on all the camps that I have been in, was less a homeless camp and more a squatters camp, which I feel is a little bit different. And I don't know. I know there have been allegations like the dog park was a den of iniquity. I never saw it, but I got the sense from this camp that there was more than meets the eye. And it wasn't even, they're right out there in the open. You know, the dog camp is off the beaten path. The the Merrimack River one is off. Cayenne was under a bridge. I mean, it's not visible.
It's the one right off the Lowell connector, right?
Right. I mean, you can see it from the highway.
Yeah.
And if you're doing the Bruce Freeman Trail, you can obviously see it. And I suppose if you park all the way at the end of the Target parking lot, and it's a huge parking lot. I don't know what all that space is for. I mean, if you're looking for housing to build, that's your spot. When people say, oh, there's no place to build in Lowell, there's tons of spots.
So if you go out to the far end opposite, like away from Target and go all the way down the other end, you can see the camp there? Okay.
Yeah, I parked right at the end, and the Bruce Freeman Trail picks up right at the parking lot.
Okay.
At the end of the parking lot. The highway is right next to you.
I did not know that. There used to be a gym out there. There was an old Bally's way back in the day.
You know you're sort of in sketchy land when people are parked back there and they're just sitting in their cars. Like, who does that? So anyway, so I parked my car.
I have some theories, but
yeah, but that's So we hear this about this in the city council. You can only build up, can't build out. There's tons of building out. I don't know who that land belongs to, but there's tons of land in Lowell that is still buildable. Anyway, so then there's the Bruce Freeman Trail, and that goes. You you cross over sort of a land bridge, and which I'm assuming the river meadow crosses under, and then you're in the camp.
In the camp. Okay.
Yep.
And you actually walked over there, and you were told to keep moving.
And so I did.
Interesting.
But I kept moving further down. I didn't enter the camp at all because even though it's 10 o'clock in the morning, it was raining.
Smart move.
I'm not going to push it. And I've never had that sort of reaction before.
All right. So you also in the column acknowledge that in almost every case, there's some sort of mental health or drug problem with homelessness. Probably both together if I had to guess.
Well, I'm not a clinician, but I'm guessing. Yeah. And when you talk to them, it's not your normal chain of decision making.
So therein lies my question. We're acknowledging it's a mental health and drug problem. We're also acknowledging that there's a certain number of people that are choosing to live this way. Right. Others may not have the mental capacity or control of their, addictions.
Some have been kicked out.
To make a good choice about that. But why then do we keep talking about a housing crisis? To me, we need to attack a mental health crisis. If we put as much focus on the mental health and addiction crisis as our government now in Massachusetts is on the housing crisis, we might make a dent in it. I think you're right that the problem, sadly, I think you're kind of end line there. The problem will never go away. I think you're right about that.
Oh, I'm glad you picked up on that. It wasn't about Lowell specifically.
Right. It was about
in general.
Yeah, in general.
There's so many layers.
That look, Jesus was dealing with the homeless issue, right? If you want to go back 2,000 some odd years, right?
Right.
So it will never go away. But if the intent is to help as many people as we can, we're attacking this the wrong way. Attacking it as a housing crisis as opposed to a mental health and addiction crisis.
I think the housing first model came out of the George Bush administration, as I recall. And it sounds promising. Give people a place to stay and they're not going to sleep in a tent by the highway. But then we found out it's like the alleged slum clearance of Little Canada. I just watched that video the other day. That didn't quite, these good intentions don't quite play out the way the policymakers think. And I think the housing first model started off promising, but didn't really work. So yes, get people into a stable environment where you can really service their needs. So that's part one. And then part two would be, I think incarceration has been the housing model of last resort. Just put them into jail. They commit a crime, you arrest them, you put them away. And Sheriff 𝐃𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐲 has been great about getting them services in the Middlesex County system. So he's been a leader on that. In fact, he was the leader on the Restoration Center, which is going to be opening right on the Chelmsford line shortly, I guess. They're starting construction.
I'm glad you said that. There's a lot of empty space. There's been a significant reduction in the number of people incarcerated in Massachusetts. Yep. They've closed prisons. And again, they don't necessarily need to be prisons again, but some type of supervised area where people cannot function or live by certain rules of decency in society.
Right.
where they're overseen, making sure that they're receiving treatment, but also taking the meds that might help them, live a more productive life. Why? This is, to me, where the focus needs to be. I think this housing focus, God's backyard, ADUs, it all sounds good. It also sounds to me like a way for
that population.
It's not going to reach that population, and ultimately, it's only going to line the pockets of
because
developers.
Exactly, and it assumes that people who are in market rate housing that might be suboptimal will bump up to this new housing and free up this lower end housing for all the homeless, which I don't think is going to happen. It's not affordable. The market rate housing isn't affordable to the people who live there now, much less the people who are going to come underneath them. Does that make sense? So, when a one bedroom is $2,500.
Right. You can't, that's the thing. To build housing today, it will not be affordable.
No.
It costs too much to build housing,
but
especially in Massachusetts, to make it affordable to anybody that is living in the circumstances where we feel the need to help them.
But there is a sense that when we build more market rate housing, somehow we're going to open up channels of housing below that new housing.
Not if you keep importing tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people who don't have the financial means to afford that housing.
Well, that's been addressed, though, hasn't that? That's not happening anymore. Well, I don't know, but there's probably a dearth of housing no matter the income level, whether it's going to be affordable housing or market rate or workforce. That's the new buzzword, workforce housing. I don't know. So,
well, that's what they tell us, but they also tell us that Massachusetts, a bunch of people have left. The moving van companies tell you Massachusetts is one of the top states in the country. People with money are leaving.
When I moved from Michigan to Massachusetts, I had to pay the freight both ways because they couldn't find anybody from Boston to leave. You know how you pay to get the moving company to pick up your stuff in Michigan, and they try to coordinate it with somebody in where you're going to.
Also, they could do a back and forth.
In that region, like it could be Ohio or Indiana or Illinois. There was nobody. I had to pay the entire thing, and I sourced it out from a bunch of firms. So people were fleeing Michigan 15 years ago. And now it seems perhaps
they're fleeing Massachusetts.
Right. And so I understand that
intentionally via policy being replaced by people who require some type of affordable housing. And it's a recipe for disaster. You can't solve a housing problem until you turn off the demand for supply.
Well, so it does beg the question, what are we accomplishing by clearing out these? Are these the hardcore who are not going to take housing? I don't know, because there hasn't been any, we talked about metrics in one of our last meetings. There hasn't been any information released by the city that says, here's how many people we placed. I called LTLC. So out of the 20 to 25 people from that camp, they had 10 openings. So where'd the other 15 people go? We don't get that information. So, we're not operating from a space where we have the total picture. So Isaiah Stevens at LTLC says, I have 5 spaces for women, predominantly it was men in that camp. I have 5 spaces for women, and they don't swap them out. You can't say, we don't have women, so we're going to put 10 men in at the place. So I have 5 spaces for women, I have 5 spaces for men. So that was as of the camp being clean. So those people didn't take those 5 spaces, so where'd they go? And I think that's the kind of conversation the city, in my opinion, does need to have. Is this working? When you do the sweeps, does it just move them someplace else? I would argue yes. I think they just go someplace else.
And the question is, where does it move them? How many of them get moved into housing? How many get moved into a different neighborhood in Lowell?
Right.
How many go to the surrounding communities? How many go towards Boston?
I was just
like the people from Mass and Cass seem to come up the train tracks.
I was at the camp behind the Walmart in Chelmsford, and it does seem expanded to me. Okay. It's much, I haven't been there in a year, but I counted probably 15 tents.
Was that before or after the winter protocol
just
ended?
Yesterday.
Because I'm going to guess that if they shut off the hotel, 25 beds.
Oh, they could have moved in there.
Maybe instead of coming back to
so we're just kind of like that shell game, which speaks to your point, is we need a better, bigger, overarching vision. If they're going to be, those people who are going to be, like we said about gangs, I mentioned Eric Gitchier, he said, do a housing or a homeless gang squad type of thing. Not the gang, but that model.
Task force,
Task force, thank you. who are your hardcore who just are dying to live outside? And
the ones living in those RV campers and,
Right.
and having
Or, well,
motorbikes drive up to them.
yeah,
I wonder if those are the same motorbikes that terrorize the people on the roads.
they were
as well.
adults.
Yeah.
They weren't children. I was up on the overpass at that point.
Smart cookie. You mentioned the LTLC, the Lowell Transitional Living Center. That was my real pet peeve because I agreed with a lot of what you wrote in the column, and I think we're kind of on the same wavelength
Tell me more,
here.
Daddy.
And people will discover we might even be more on the same wavelength. But LTLC, you said something that I'm like, oh, I need to talk to her about that. And I will. But first, let me thank my Daily Pulse sponsors. Hey, it gives Melanie a chance to take a sip of water off camera as well. Plus, it'll leave you in suspense. It's like the cliffhanger of podcasting. Thanks to our Daily Pulse sponsors, Ray Booten, licensed realtor, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, certified appraiser in both of those states as well. Find them online, realestaterayBooten.com. Thanks as well to our friends at WellPoint. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. Washington Savings Bank, banking that goes the extra mile. Make the switch now to Washington Savings Bank. TMI Properties, quality and value at every price point. Find your perfect space with TMI. Mahoney Oil, providing warmth and protection to Greater Lowell, Southern New Hampshire since 1925. The Greater Lowell Community Foundation, improving the quality of life throughout Greater Lowell through strategic, impactful philanthropy. A number of new grant opportunities have opened up. Check out their website, GLC Foundation, glcfoundation.org. Francis E. Prevention Insurance, the agency Greater Lowell has counted on to protect its most valued assets since 1982. And by the Massachusetts Pirates, bringing all the hard-hitting action and excitement of arena football to the Mill City. Later on today, we're going to record this week's Inside the Pirates podcast with kicker Josh Gable, back for another go-around with the Pirates. You didn't take your opportunity to sneak out, Melanie. You stuck around. You're a glutton for punishment. All right. So as you wrote about the Lowell Transitional Living Center and the situation you kind of outlined, they've got so many beds. They've, the city's been trying to move them forever, by the way. It wasn't, that one motion was the most recent one that got it. I think at least 15 years was the first time I remember a council motion on it.
Well, and interestingly enough, I've been doing a little digging. I think that what the holdup might be that property has covenants not unlike the Smith Baker, that they got grants. And if you move, like with the Smith Baker, if you don't turn it into housing,
there's a penalty.
There's a I can't remember the word they use, like an exclusive use clause.
Does it have to be affordable housing, subsidized? Or
I have to look into that.
Can it be the model that we seem to be moving to, first floor commercial and then 3, 4, 5, 6, however many floors?
What I hear is
housing.
that it's a 30 to 40 year covenant. So that's an extension. And if you don't, like if you tear it down and turn it into market rate housing, I think you have to pay back the grant, which I don't. I have to dig a little deeper into that. So that would explain a lot, because I sit here thinking about the impact on the downtown, which is considerable. It's not their fault, but this is just the name of the game. And I think about Heritage Properties trying to build a $10 million market rate 37 unit
right across the street.
Right across the street. Like, how's that going to work out with no on-site parking? So what's that going to look like?
Well, don't worry. I'm told nobody needs cars anymore. We should. I read something over the weekend that said we should just not bother focusing on the potholes because it'll slow pedestrian motorists down.
I saw that, and I thought that was actually brilliant. Just dig a pothole.
Yeah, try that politically. Right?
Yeah.
Run a city council campaign. We're not going to fill the potholes because we want you to slow down.
No speed bumps. We're just going to dig a big hole, a big trench right in the middle.
I invite any candidate for council to run on that platform and see how that goes.
Talk about accountability. Yeah, slow down or else.
But here's the sentence you wrote.
Okay.
That in some ways encapsulated what the city of Lowell, I feel, had been for too long, and what I think we need to move away from. You wrote, as goes the shelter, so goes the city.
It almost makes me cry.
What did you mean by that?
Well,
I'm going to give you a chance before I tell you why it was such a terrible thing to say.
Oh, really? Oh, well, because I feel like, the shelter, when it was founded in the 1980s, was a different Lowell. It was down on its heel. It was back on its heels or down on its luck. And you could put anything in there. It wouldn't matter because things were so bad. But things have shifted now, and that's a good thing. So I'm sorry that came across as a raw deal, because it was actually, times have changed. You're getting this $2 million development across the street. That other used to be a gym. I don't remember, right across from the
club.
Yeah,
Yep.
that got HDIP grant of like $2 million. He's been trying to develop that forever.
McFarland.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got this energy that wants to be uncorked. And then you've got this, this big thing right there in the middle of it. And I feel like for the good of everybody, it's not serving the needs of the unhoused, and it's not serving the needs of the city or the business community or the residents. Just move it. Problem solved.
All right, I'm not mad at you anymore. I misinterpreted what you I wasn't really mad at you, but to me it was. I took it as if we don't take how I interpret it, if we don't take care of the shelter and the people that live in there, the city will never prosper. And
it's not a moralistic thing.
Okay, I thought that to me, I took it as that shelter as an indication of how the city.
This is our center of our humanity.
So you're saying if that shelter is empty and goes out of business, it means the city's doing well. If the city is moved, it means the downtown prospers.
Well, two things. Isn't it? I mean, you run Megan House, right?
I don't run it.
Well, you're part of Megan House.
Yes.
Eventually, you want to be to the point where you don't need a Megan House.
The dream of the founder was all of those houses get torn down and you build parks where kids can play.
Right, whether you're UTEC or CBA or LTLC or...
You're just feeding me segues, by the way.
But these become self-fulfilling, they become businesses. They're not nonprofits. They become enterprises. And so put that aside, it's a business model, humanitarian or otherwise, that's not working in that location. Same thing, you're not going to open a restaurant, a chicken restaurant in the middle of a vegetarian town. Like it might not have always been vegetarian, but now it is. So you might need to move. And so that's just practical. So there wasn't a our boats only float if we take care of the least among us. It was more...
I completely misinterpreted that. And now I'm curious, how many other people read that the same way? A couple of people did comment to me about that.
That's interesting.
Saying, is she nuts for writing that? But no. I think coming on the heels of the previous stuff about the homeless. Okay. So folks think, let's address this. Folks think that you have more compassion for the homeless / vagrant population. We can put aside which one they fall into. Squatters, than the other other 100,000 people or so.
No.
In the city who are dealing with some of the issues like the crime and the filth that comes from you described the filth. Mm-hmm. So I want to give you a chance to address that.
I think they can be served better. And I think there can be better collaboration and better problem solving as I've dug into it. So I think, well, what's the problem? Just move the darn place. Why is that such a traumatic thing? Who cares? And then I realized, well, there might be these covenants attached to it, which, like the Smith Baker, you can't just do whatever you want because you might have to pay them back if you don't do what they want you to do. So there might be some restrictions on that property. I don't know. But that sort of helps answer the question of why this is so intractable. And so sometimes I look at these things and I think, well, let's just fix it. How hard can that be? And I know of 2 properties that the city had been looking at to move the shelter to. Apparently one, I don't know, I've heard, Dutton and Fletcher right across from the Lowell 5 Bank a while ago that they were looking to build something over there that's got a big X on it now.
Oh, okay, yeah, the old
which is sort of off of the downtown and this just spitballing. And then there's another place out on Stedman Road, a temple, which is huge and probably could be repurposed, but it's in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, that's one that I had heard of.
But it's down the road from the new restoration center, so it's not too far. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess I just feel like that line was more about the business prospects of the city. The city's trying to come back. It's trying to get some momentum. This is an obstacle to that.
And in essence, you're saying as goes the shelter, so goes the city. You're saying if the shelter is booming, the city's struggling.
Conversely.
Yeah.
Correct. Right. So the shelter was founded when the city was in the dumps. Now the shelter is in the dumps and the city is trying to, it's an inverse relationship.
All right.
It doesn't make sense.
Right. Thank you for clarifying that. And it kind of goes, because I almost felt as I was reading the earlier part of it, you have been far more compassionate towards the unhoused. I'm going to use your term
even if
than I have, but yeah. I felt as you described that camp, you were intentionally saying there's 3 RVs in there.
This is a different kind of camp.
Yeah, you didn't necessarily come out and say it in the column, but you painted a picture for folks that don't feel sorry necessarily.
This is different. There are dimensions. It's like in adoption. You can adopt a child from Russia, and then there's domestic adoption through DCF. And then there's surrogate adoption. They're not the same. They all have different layers. And so there are homeless, but there are different layers of homeless. And that camp is a different layer of homeless. I'm not a case manager. Maybe they're like all the others, but it felt differently.
Yeah, I'm going to guess there aren't a lot of case managers helping those folks.
Well, that's the
either.
other piece of that. Yeah, they're professional staff of 40 and 25% vacancies.
Talking about the LTLC.
Yeah.
One of the things I was curious about, how many community advocates? Every time I see the word advocates, I think, just little political foot soldiers. How many of them are unstaffed? And by the way, if those stay on staff, that's not a bad thing.
Well, what I saw,
a shelter advocates, homeless advocates,
case managers, program manager.
All will ideally work with the folks in the shelter. But what are the advocates doing?
The case managers?
No, there's you. Oh God, I'd have to find the
I'd have to look at the
column item here. Just I think I might have saved it on my phone.
Well, like they had maintenance technician, they had property manager, they had a chef, like a kitchen worker.
Shift leaders, case, clinical, and program managers, program advocates.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the job description. To me, those are the people that are going
out there and lecturing politicians about how they should vote and spend taxpayer money. That's, and. If some of the nonprofits in the area would be better served getting rid of their advocates and concentrating on servicing the people.
I just think you have to know where you've been and now where you are and compare those two to figure out where you're going to go. I mean, I think that's a fair sort of way. So back in the day, I was looking at old Lowell Sun articles. The shelter was staffed by 28 people. It wasn't owned by SMOC. And somewhere that it was locally owned by a nonprofit.
Yes.
I don't know why that changed. I don't go back far enough. I have to take you to breakfast.
Just money, like everything else. Finances started to dictate that. Big fish are swallowing the little fish, even in the nonprofit world. So you see that with recovery centers, these giant recovery centers. If you see them advertised on TV or advertising on the radio, you can bet there's a big bureaucracy that's siphoning off a lot of salaries that should be going to people in recovery.
And there's not a lot, but that absorption resulted in at least 10, 11 more positions added to that place. Now, does that correspond with the number of homeless? I don't know, because I don't have the numbers of what the homeless population was like from the 2000s on. I mean, this is all sort of...
It seems more now, to be honest with you. Yeah, from anecdotally, I can't offer the proof. All right, you didn't write this.
Okay.
But it was in the column. And it's funny, how many people think you wrote everything in the column because you're the first part. And you had stopped for a while, you would just say it was a staff report. Now you're intentionally assigning names. Melanie, written by Melanie Griffith on the homeless, by Peter Courier on UTEC, and by Prue Brighton on Drake, whatever the Drake issue was.
So there's no confusion.
All right. We need to talk about the quote unquote mindless cuts at UTEC that Peter wrote about on Sunday, which made my head explode. Mindless cuts. It came on the heels of a Facebook post. Remember Eva Peron, Madonna, Don't cry for me, Argentina.
Yeah.
Don't cry for me, UTEC, folks. Please shed the tears for UTEC, and I'll tell you why in a second. But the Trump administration has cut money from
DOJ,
Department of Justice. What do they call them? Diversion programs meant to help
recidivism,
to reduce recidivism, keep people out of reoffending and going back to jail, and yada yada yada. And that is UTEC is the big fish. UTEC is the Moby Dick in that pond.
They have the palace up there on Warren Street. Yeah.
I know a little bit about the group. I've interviewed them many, many times. I've looked into their financing. I know a little bit about their day-to-day operations as well. I'm supposed to cry, and again, you didn't write this, but I'm going to give you a chance to defend your colleague, Peter Courier. I'm supposed to cry because the Trump administration cut, what, $800,000 from UTEC?
I thought it was higher, but let's go with that.
Whatever the number, I'll go back and find the number, but I just did a little digging of UTEC's financial reports here that they need to be audited every year as a nonprofit. And this was in 2023 is what this data is available. By the way, I also did uncover that in 2022, they got cited by the state's OSD, Operational Services Division, for not filing their paperwork on time. But they eventually did file it on time. And look at this, man. If I were running a business that turned a $4.5 million profit in a fiscal year, Damn, I'd be a really successful businessman. Not my numbers, folks. These are UTEC's numbers. $17.3 million of revenue in 2023. Expenses of $12.8 million. That's a $4.5 million profit. $4.5 million profit on 12.8 of expenses. Just gonna do some quick math here. That's a 35.15% profit that they turned. Look at those total assets. $38.5 million. Wow. I bet the developers that are cringing when they see those numbers. All right, they got some liabilities there, probably mortgages and loans on some of these $38 million in assets, but I guess they could sell all their assets and have a $29 million bank account. Why does UTEC need taxpayer funding at this point? Well, can we at least wait until they use up some of that $4.5 million profit before we send more hardworking American tax dollars?
Here I don't disagree with you, and I think that's where Harvard, got hammered too. They have a market cap of $4.3 billion, and it's like, and they own all of Alston, or however you say that.
But your taxes,
right?
And then my taxes go to help support these organizations.
And their money makes money, so they're past the point where they have to, their money is making their money. So that's a pretty sweet place to be in. You almost feel like there should be a cutoff. When the money you have in the bank is making more money than you bring in, then maybe you don't need to bring in that money. I see a sort of parallel construct here with the local level. Yeah. It's good that you're doing well. You shouldn't be punished for doing well, but step up your game then.
Well, you're a nonprofit. Right. You shouldn't be turning a profit. Money should be going into services, right?
Right. It should go into services.
And we should probably see, if we're talking millions, and we're talking that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
$12.8 million has gone into fighting recidivism just in Greater Lowell. Are we seeing less youth crime, loose violence? I mean, I read your newspaper. I follow Aaron Curtis. I don't see a difference. I see an awful lot of repeat offenders. I don't. There's some stat out there that 5% of the people commit 95% of the crimes, or something crazy like that. So where is all this federal money and state money that is supposed to help alleviate the recidivism problem here? Is it really working? And isn't it time? Is it mindless to start saying, hey, let's try something different? Or is it mindless to just keep pouring millions of dollars down their throat and the problem doesn't get better? Is homelessness getting better?
Well, one of the ways you find out if there's another way to do it is you cut off the funding stream. And I mean, I think some of it's diabolical and unnecessary. As a counterpoint, Alternative House had a $400,000 grant that they shared or split with LPD to do screening of domestic violence victims. So when somebody calls in domestic violence, they ask them these 20 questions. Were you strangled? Did he threaten you? Predominantly, it's 98% men. Did he threaten you with a knife? All this kind of stuff. And depending on that score, they might determine next steps, not just for the victim, but for the alleged assailant. That was cut. So, that's $200,000 to what I think is a very bare bones operation. When you look at their ProPublica filing for Alternative House, they probably bring in $600,000 and they probably have $38,000 in the bank. Like a huge difference in terms of scale. But I feel like they're really, I'm sure Megan House is the same way, that your revenue, you're pouring everything into your programs. You're utilizing every last dime, last penny to convert. You're not banking it. And
well, some are creating, program advocates, community outreach strategists who get really active during campaign season. I don't see them. I don't see them as much in February and January, but boy, do I see them during campaign season. You'll get to see a lot of them now
with the upcoming election.
Although I do know
they won't be funded.
Well, there might be a political method to the madness. I agree with you on Alternative House, by the way. When I hear about Alternative House, when I hear about the cuts to the food bank, that part of me says, okay, we we need to, get the legitimate stuff in here, the stuff that we see is working, and try to keep funding more of that, and weed out the stuff that doesn't seem to be working or might have a little extra layer of fat on them, kind of like I do.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's inappropriate to, this is the whole thing with the MBTA funding. If you didn't pass MBTA, we're not going to give you extra funding, as Milton's finding out now has a $9 million override. If you don't accommodate our sanctuary city, we're going to cut your funding. I mean, having the, it's not even a velvet hammer anymore. It's just a flat out hammer. That is sort of the way it goes. Healy's doing it as much as Trump is doing it. So the question is whether it's going to ripple down, and at the local level, they're going to do it. If you don't do this, we're not going to give you money. And that's why the CBGG or Community Development, CDBG money, or the SEG, Emergency Services Grant, is that going to be more accountable? Like, okay, well, we don't like your programming. Right. We're not going to give you money. You have you're too top heavy. Your salary.
That's my hope. My hope is that what happens with these cuts means let's not trim away essential services to prove our point. Let's trim away some unnecessary fat, which I believe many of these NGOs have, and let's repurpose it to the people we're serving, and let's maybe try some different approaches and see if we can actually get rid of some of these problems, because the war on poverty 60 years later, I would say, has been lost. Right. And it's time, just like Ukraine and Russia, it's time to end the war.
Well, Head Start, for instance, they say if you don't learn to read, you learn to read until 3rd grade, and 4th grade, you read to learn. So if you don't learn to read, you're not going to learn to read.
Liam Skinner will say every single educator you talk to that a kid is trailing in that.
Head Start, the gains are lost by third or 4th grade. Like, why is that? I don't know. So is that just a program in the moment? I'd love to get Carl in here and talk about what does that mean for programming and for financing of those programs. Is it just a blip in time? It could be worse, which is hard to prove. Or, you're not going to sell something on, well, it could be worse. Give me $100 million.
Well, it seems that's how they sell it. It's going to get worse if you sell it. But I'm looking at it like, let's try something different.
Right. I think we're all going to find that opportunity.
So. Yes, we most certainly are. But again, don't cry for UTEK. They'll be okay. I promise you. And then maybe once they use up some of that profit, then they can, we can go back to.
We'll see if anybody takes, and we'll see if anybody takes salary cuts.
Exactly. Speaking of nonprofits, which we've been talking about, let's shift a little bit to politics, which was also in the Sunday column. See, I'm glad you're providing me so much material here. This
Teddy,
is great.
This is what would Teddy do. I've been telling you that.
You mentioned the newest candidate in the Acre, District 7. We had the story of Sidney Liang, who is now running the 3rd candidate in. So we're going to have another preliminary, which is great.
Well, provided they get their
correct
their signatures.
I'm going to assume that Sidney Liang will get his signatures. I'm going to assume that Councilor Paul Retayem will, and I think Jose Cervantes will as well. He reached out to me yesterday. I'm going to let all
these candidates know we're going to be vetting. I know the Election Commission does too, but we're going to be looking at all those names.
Yes.
If they're all in green pen, we have a problem.
But what I'm not sure sometimes when I look at my ballot, I'm not sure if I'm looking at the election ballot in Lowell or a nonprofit board listing. What is with the Coalition for Better Acre and all the candidates that are running around there?
I don't know. Maybe they're hedging their bets.
Sidney Liang is on the CBA board. His campaign manager is none other than the former executive director of the CBA, Yunju Choi. Sixto de Jesus sits on the CBA board. Right. There's a gentleman who said to me he's contemplating a school committee run, Elkin Montoya. He sits on that board. Amada Gregory, who you may remember from 2023, running against Wayne. She sits on that board. It's a lot of political activism.
Well, maybe that has a history of particular community activism. So that wouldn't surprise me in the same way that UTEK isn't really, they're helping the community, but are they really, I don't know. I feel like CBA has always been part of the Acre. you know, part of
which
the
was
ground up kind of
surprising to
stuff.
me when I see an organization called Coalition for a Better Acre start building housing in Drake and in Haverhill. I start to wonder, like, hey, what have we just become a business? Have we become an extension of state government, or are we focusing on the acre? These are the kind of things that start to run through my mind. Yeah. Just curious.
So where was the question?
Am I going to be looking at a ballot or a nonprofit
Oh, that's right,
board?
a board of directors. We're voting for the board of directors. Dealer's choice.
I think that question was more of a sarcastic statement.
Okay. I'm going to steer clear of the sarcasm, but
what do you think of the field so far?
Weak.
Is it going to drive turnout?
I don't think so.
No.
I think the issues, I think the candidates are not going to be the driving thing. If the candidates highlight an issue, like their, Belvedere with the ADU, then you drive an election, as we saw with the appointment of Cory Belanger. So if they can find, they all talk about economic development and business downtown. They do all good schools for our kids. And I would say just talk about the homeless. You will win in a landslide. Like, you will drive the conversation. You want to drive the conversation. So are they going to do that? I'm not seeing it from the platforms right now.
I feel that housing in some way, shape, or form is going to, and where people stand on housing, because it does tie in, as our discussion has shown, as your Sunday column showed, the homeless, vagrant issue, housing, God's backyard. Will there be a left? I think the ADU became the dominant issue of 2023, just because it was so close to the election. Interestingly enough, the activists who were bullying the Lowell city councilors around didn't get really active in the state race, though, did they? Around when the governor said, forget what Lowell, we're going to force something even worse. We got some less tasty medicine we're going to pour down your throat. And where were the activists? Where was Belvedere in 2024?
Yeah.
Where's Belvedere in God's backyard?
Well, that's that very parochial sort of, that's my backyard. So that's all I'm going to worry about. Whatever they do in Milton or wherever, that's on them. But yeah, I agree. It doesn't, you don't have to make sense, Teddy. You just have to win.
You just have to win. You don't think the field of candidates so far is going to lead to a significantly higher turnout than the 7,500? I think just having a competitive race in Belvedere will. I think last time John Leahy ran unopposed. They're
going to come out no matter what.
They will.
Belvedere.
But as we've seen, when they come out, as they did in 2017, at like 50-something%, they can drive turnout and they can really drive an election. Will they?
Are those candidates doing that, though?
I think they're working. I'm seeing people are sending me photos of door knockers that Belinda Duran has already dropped off. People are telling me they're seeing Finn signs, Gendron signs, Duran signs. Right. I actually talked to Cory Belanger about that. He said it's too early to put out signs. His mind is people start to get pissed off when they see their people's lawns littered with signs this early in the year. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Right. Yeah.
But that's a fascinating four-way primary right now.
Yeah. So there's Finn, Duran,
Gendron,
and
Cory Belanger.
Yeah, right.
So and now you've got 3 in the acre.
So
and to my knowledge, you don't have anywhere else except for 𝐶𝐸𝐸 𝐷eJesus in the at-large race. There is another gentleman who opened an OCPF page in October and then completely went dark. Ricky Thatch.
Yeah, I wrote about him.
Completely gone dark.
He didn't even have, his person hadn't even taken the training. Incidentally, neither is, who's the new one just posted?
Sidney Liang?
No.
Jose Cervantes?
No, I'm sorry. Kumar. It's on the OPCF.
Oh, there's
another candidate.
Oh, where?
I'd have to look on my phone. But it just posted, if you follow them on Twitter, they post all the people.
Yes. Oh, was this yesterday?
The 25th, I believe, or 26th.
Oh, okay.
I can't, sorry, Teddy.
That's all right. We'll find them. Thank you.
So, exactly. Well, I thought everybody knew. So, I'm usually last to know.
My peeps usually, as soon as somebody posts it on OCPF, they send me a link.
Yeah, seriously. I can find it. I'll tell you who it is.
All right. Well,
I will look into it.
Yeah, let's not leave people in suspense. We've had one cliffhanger so far.
Go to commercial break.
So,
Let me just find that real quick.
But to Melanie's point, I think the candidates are what drives turnout in an election. You can maybe get issues. I'm not sure if we'll have such a hot button issue. Housing, I think, will be the issue. I don't know how dominant it'll be, but if we need to start getting the candidates need to get out there and start engaging and getting exciting. I think they will in Belvedere. I think 𝐶𝐸𝐸 𝐷eJesus can in the at-large race, but I think he's got to I think he's got to draw a clear line between himself and the three incumbents who.
Well, that's the thing. If you're just like them, right?
Right. You've got to the challenge.
Why you?
You got. Yeah.
Why you? You know.
You gotta stand out.
They do play nice sometimes. It's 𝐃𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐲 𝐏𝐻𝐿. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not for the city council. 18th Middlesex.
Oh, he's running against
Tara Hung.
Oh, he's running against Tara Hung already. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Is he upset about God's backyard? I
don't know. It was just filed on the 24th. I'm gonna have to pull that paperwork.
All right.
But
that was last Thursday.
That's a lot. That's really early, but. So, you know, people are, it's easy to raise your hand, but do you have the answer? You know, there was always that kid in your class calling me, and then they would hedge, and they didn't really have the answer. They just wanted attention. You know, and it was like, shut up, sit down. And so do they really, you know, and I guess when we get into the debates, I don't know who's going to run them this year. LTC, I think, ran them last year.
They ran the at-large. Yeah, they also try to run some district. I'm going to try to run some district ones.
Good.
If you have any,
right.
Again, we've got 2 school committee. I have not heard anything other than Danielle McFadden announcing for at-large and Elkin Montoya considering it. I have Bob Hoey, I'm told, is considering it. He hasn't responded.
He's been talking about right.
But so you've got at-large. But what's interesting is you have 4 school committee districts and not a single challenger. And last time, only one of the 4 ran opposed. And by the way, that's the one that lost. Fred Bahu was the only challenger in a district race and ended up winning. So if you want to serve on the school committee, you want to serve in government, and you've got kids in the system, take a look at the school committee. There might be
little wiggle room.
There's some wiggle room there, right?
Well, maybe Jerry Nutter could run for council. I just read
for council he can run. He can't run for school committee. By the way, talk about nonsensical. These campaign finance laws and these ethics rulings. I've always found them absolutely nonsensical.
Yeah.
I almost feel like depending on who you get on the telephone,
he articulated that really well.
They're gonna, you know, I felt that they don't even issue written rulings. You can request one. Like, you know, John Leahy requested a written ruling because I said, do you have one? And he, you know.
Well, and he was kind of like, well, why should I? Because they said it's okay and it's not going to make any sense anyway. You know, like,
but I mean, I trusted him.
Right.
But I would like to see, like, you can tell me that, they told me it's okay. Well, if you don't have it in writing, it's not like they're going to come forward and blow the whistle on you. Somebody else. Have to, which kind of sets up a silly system. What's the point of having an ethics commission if they don't issue their rulings in writing?
And it seems questionable depending on which side of the house you're on. So, which doesn't really make any sense. But anyway, and I don't know what's going on. I need to touch base. He's been on vacation, but I need to touch base with Wayne Jeunesse. Like, is he running?
When I last chatted with him in early December, he said he hadn't decided yet.
Yeah.
He's been very quiet.
He has been very quiet.
So, and a lot of speculation that he's not running, a lot of speculation that Jackie Doherty is not going to run for school committee. She told me hasn't decided. She's going to wait for the budget process and then make her decision, is what she told me. Oh, the budget process ends, June 30?
Yeah. Well, they should be, are they meeting this week?
School committee?
Yeah, I think, are they?
I think this is their week to meet.
So they're going to kick that off pretty soon. That all starts in May.
Well, we shall find out.
What else you got on your list?
God's backyard. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't agree with Bob Hunt. I mean, I do and I don't. I think, yes, it looks coordinated. So what? I mean, that's how campaigns are run. You know, I think the ADUs were coordinated as well. I think gay rights was coordinated. So what? You know, you just have to decide if you want God's backyard in your backyard. And that's it, you know, so that is going to fall to the state delegation, not the city council. And I don't particularly have a problem with Tara Hung and Vanna Howard proposing that. They don't need permission, you know, really. So, you know, if the council's feelings were hurt, okay, I get it. But that's separate from the legislation. Don't legislate based on your emotion on whether, you know, you weren't invited to the party.
Well, I think the upset is that if they didn't like ADUs, they're certainly not going to like God's backyard. So I think that's where the opposition stems from, and now the rest of it, I think, is
Trump's getting rid of nonprofits, so it might become a moot point. Churches won't have nonprofit status, so they can do whatever they want.
So I did find it interesting, and Leslie Boder talked about this last Friday. Like, wait a minute, we're supposed to be separating God from
that's the conflict I see, right?
But suddenly you're going to grant special exemptions to churches. By the way, is it just God or is it Buddha?
Right.
Is it
or the temples? Right.
Is it right? I mean, where do the Buddhists fall in this? Where do
the universal God.
Everybody else? The Hindu. There's a lot of different religions out there. Where do the imams fall in this? Do they get a backyard?
I think it's a promising, I like the idea. I like the idea that people are thinking broadly, and we'll see if it gets any traction. I'm not particularly offended that, 5 other, or 10 other states or 15 other states are doing it at the same time.
I wish they'd think less about invitations to come in and more about putting up a closed for business where capacity. You can't go into certain nightclubs once they get to a certain capacity. My hunch is Massachusetts is at capacity based on what we can afford. I'm looking at the state budget. I'm hearing the tales of woe, and I'm like, we might want to put up a temporarily closed sign.
All the moving trucks are already moving out.
They're all moving out.
So
and they're being replaced by flights and phone apps from.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
So
not anymore.
You can't beat that drum anymore.
If we lose a congressional seat in an electoral vote, then
Do you think that's going to happen? Do you think?
I think it was going to happen in 2020, and they saved it by.
Oh, interesting.
Whose
seat?
Well, that depends on the Massachusetts legislature. That's what the real fun policy. I don't know what it was like. Has Michigan lost any congressional seats when you were living out there at the time?
I don't remember.
Because we went from 13. We were at 13 in Massachusetts when I was a kid, I believe, and we've gone down to 9. And there was some talk that we were in jeopardy. But that's where the fun starts. Like I remember Marty Meehan had made some enemies on Beacon Hill, Billy Bulger and Finner and that crew, and they suddenly told him I forget what he was pushing. He was pushing something. And they suddenly said when it came time to kind of redistrict the seats, his district suddenly came into the discussion.
Right.
And then Marty backed off a little, and his seat was saved. I don't think Lori Trahan's seat has changed significantly from Nikki Tsongas and Marty Meehan's seat significantly. So I'd be hard pressed to seeing a situation where Lowell wouldn't be the center of a congressional seat, but
just based on size,
it could happen.
Yeah, she's been quiet lately. We haven't gotten her.
Lori Trahan? Yeah. Well, she's out there on social media a lot. She's doing her daily stuff.
But it is kind of interesting when the spigot is turned off. They're not as prominent. I mean, they're not doling out the bucks anymore. She used to be in the paper or in town, doing those facsimile checks. Little community health center, CBA, the little school over there, it's just.
Well, they needed to kind of push the infrastructure spending.
Oh, the infrastructure spending, right? The bridges,
because there was an election in 2024. It's a little quieter now. The focus seems to be more on stopping Trump than helping. But
I don't know what money are they going to help with. Even the money that's been allocated is up in the air.
How much do they spend every year? $4 trillion. There's some money to be had. $1 trillion of which, by the way, is interest on the debt.
Yeah.
So it might behoove us to save some of that trillion, and
there's no
that
question
can go back into the
debt is a ticking time bomb. But I'm not sure that, just pragmatically speaking, having worked in the government, I'm not sure that cutting all these federal workers who pay into Medicare and Social Security and pay taxes, you're paying them unemployment.
You worked in government?
I did for 8 years.
I did not know this.
I worked for drug enforcement with U.S. Customs.
Really? DEA?
Nope.
U.S. Okay.
I was not an agent.
I have a cousin who was a DEA agent.
Really?
Yeah.
They were right across the street from us. I could put on my binoculars.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, what a small world.
Yeah. Detroit was like a hotbed because we had everybody has an international airport now, but we had that international airport. My first day on the job, the agents brought in a woman, 18-year-old woman flying from Paris to Detroit, which was a direct flight. And she had diamonds in her carry-on, uncut diamonds. But, some guy, they were in a box. And she said, some man came up to her at de Gaulle Airport and said, I missed my flight. My sister's going to meet you in Detroit. Can you carry this? This is a present for her. So was she innocent or was she a mule?
That's a good question.
They didn't care. They locked her up. That's for the judge to figure out.
Keep an eye on your luggage at all times.
And I wanted to go in there and, break her out because I was convinced she was innocent. This poor, 18-year-old and, could happen to anybody.
You wanted to be like that judge in Wisconsin?
Well, there you go. I'm going to unlock that cage door. And that when that happened, I was like, holy smoke, this is it. This is the real deal. They're not playing.
Last item for this show, in the column that we haven't touched on.
All right.
The manager's contract.
I think, it's a big job. He's on call 24/7. I'm not going there. I didn't write about the whole fight over.
Are they overpaid or underpaid?
I think $300,000 is probably the cap for municipal level, but I think he's got a lot of responsibility. I don't begrudge him.
So this is I go back and forth on this discussion. Part of me, and especially when I look at some of these small town people, and they're pulling in almost as much as the Lowell city manager, who oversees 120,000 people, and they're overseeing 30, 40, 50,000, and they're making almost the same money. And the argument you always get is, oh, but in the private sector, they'd be worth so much. And I always say, how come none of them ever go to the private sector?
It's kind of like, they go to other municipal
They jump from one government job to another.
Or nonprofits.
But conversely, so it was likened to me, Batch, when he's not holding court at the coffee mill. He loves
where is he?
He loves when I say that.
They're closed for the week.
He's giving me an alternative view of things. And he said, well, look at it as they're the CEO of a giant corporation. In Lowell in particular, we're now a $600 million corporation. Yeah. Your manager is kind of underpaid at $264,000, to be $300,000 in 5 years. Even in a town like Chelmsford, I mean, their budget's pretty large. $6-figure million, right? Well, that's 9 figures. Right?
Well, they have a better tax and retail base, so that helps cushion.
But $230,000. A CEO would probably make $750,000 to $1 million, if not more, right? So I can see that side of it. Ultimately, I always fall on, but it's taxpayer money. And there's got to be something. It's called public service. They all talk about public service, and we always say thank you for your service.
Right.
When it comes to service, shouldn't there be some? Okay, I get it's not free, but there should be some kind of discount with it. So I'm not crying for Tom Golden that he's not making as much as a Fortune 500 CEO. I'm not crying for Paul Cohen or John Curran or any of these other folks.
But it's like an arms race, isn't it?
Right. And they start stealing them from one another. And it's crazy. In these small towns, it's absolutely nuts what happens.
They've stolen quite a few of our people. Little I know.
The under ones, a ton.
DPD, particularly, they took a bunch of people.
Yeah, and half the work in chunks.
Yeah, well, so each community can do what they want, but I see your point, is it doesn't seem parity. I think he earns his keep. I don't have a problem with his. I'm not a taxpayer, though. So
you're not a taxpayer in Lowell.
And if candidates want to make an issue of it, I think there's a lot of value in single point issues, like just drill,
And differentiate yourself from your opponent, right or wrong.
Right or wrong.
If you run on the same issues that they do and you're on the same side.
And we'll write about it, for God's sake, because,
That's right. We need a little drama.
We need drama, and that's good copy, and people want to read that, and it distinguishes you from the pack. Yeah. So I think that's what Mark Lombardo is trying to do. I don't know why over in Billerica. Like, what the heck? The guy doesn't even show up to the state legislature. Every state rep I talk to says, who? Lombardo, who? But, Billerica keeps... He
keeps winning.
He has weak candidates.
I remember when he was just a kid, when he was first elected, he was really just a kid. Now he's no longer that kid anymore.
Teresa English, is doing all her 14-point plan like it's the, League of Nations or something. All she had to do was say, he doesn't come to work. And just hammer on that. And then the other thing she could have said, or any of them could have said, he doesn't bring home the bacon. So we don't have, this is not a complicated thing. So anyways, he's picking fights at the State House.
Yes, he is.
And I'm not sure, his single issue is that Republicans suck. So I'm not sure how that's going to play out with the leadership.
There's a Republicans. Don't get in the middle of that civil war.
Bill Ricca isn't going to get anybody from the legislature.
The Democrats would be, I always say, when your enemy is self-destructing, don't stand in their way.
Stay out of the way.
Democrats, I know you've got your issues. I highlight them all the time. Let the Republicans do what they're doing.
Right.
And you won't have to worry about your issues.
But it is curious. Like, I would love to ask Mark. It's not my district, so I'm just spitballing here.
That's Peter's district.
I'm going to ask him. Could you ask Mark? Because it's driving me crazy. What are you doing? What's the end game here?
That would be a great conversation.
That's a good column.
I think Mark is a Trumper.
Oh, is he?
And Peter's a never Trumper. That'd be I'd broadcast that conversation.
I'll
right
let
here.
Peter know.
Let's see if we can set that up.
Yeah. So fighting has to have sort of a nexus, right? You have to take the high ground on a low point. And that's an art, because you can't look like a bully and you can't look like a poser or a carpetbagger, but you have to take the high ground on down and dirty issues. And the Republicans have been really good at it. They take DEI, they take, not that that's a low, but you know what I'm saying, they inflame them, or the immigration. And they're really good at saying, I'm on the high ground, and anybody who doesn't agree with me is because they're just letting all the rapists and, murderers.
Scott Jennings calls them the 80-20 issues. You find where the 80% of the people are and you side with them.
I mean, there's nothing illegal about that, and that's been since history immortal, for crying out loud. And now we don't have the Coliseum, so we don't have a way to vent all that angst. So
we have CNN.
or Fox.
Or Fox. All right. Melanie Gilbert from the Lowell Sun. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for providing all of our material today in the Sunday column.
Oh, well, you're welcome. And I do want to again clarify. I'm sorry if that was misinterpreted, and that's a lesson to me to be more careful about my words. I wasn't trying to be clever. It was more like, this is important for the health and wealth of the business district. Something needs to change. And I don't know what that something is.
I'm glad you clarified that, because and I agreed with so much of the other stuff. That comment kind of stuck out to me.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, why is she saying that? But you explained it, and it makes all the sense in the world. And
we need a downtown.
If that shelter is vibrant, your downtown is not.
Richard Healy says he can't run a business. I mean, other factors as well, but he's a half block from Jay's. I mean, there's a lot of turmoil. Purple Carrot. There's a lot of turmoil in the downtown because of the homeless issue. We've got to figure something out if we're going to have any hope.
I think with all those $100 million going in, whether it's Hamilton Canal or, as you mentioned, the Heritage property, the McFarland property, all these others, I think the shelter problem will eventually take care of it. So they call it gentrification, which is a topic for our next discussion in a few weeks.
All right, okay? I'm there for that, Teddy.
Thank you, Melanie. Always good to have you in here. Always great to have Melanie Gilbert from the Lowell Sun. Always great to have you as well. Tomorrow, Lowell Mayor Danny Rourke will join us, along with former Mayor Bill Samaras. We'll talk about tonight's City Council meeting and all the other hot button issues in the city. I haven't booked Thursday yet. Friday, we're giving away horses. You could own a horse that's running in the Kentucky Derby. Imagine that. You'll own that horse. Kinda. Good thing is you don't have to pay for it. You don't have to feed it. You don't have to clean up after it.
Like a nonprofit.
Yeah, like a nonprofit. Thanks, Melanie. But get to InsideLowell.com, see how you can enter. Look on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. We've given you a number of different ways to enter. But we're going to do the drawing on Friday with Leslie Boder. Kiki Rudy and City Councilor John Dakota will be here as well. And maybe we'll even talk about the race, and we'll see if we can get Keith Rudy to give us the winner, as he did for you, Melanie.
I know, and I should have taken his advice.
In 2024?
Yes, 8-1 odds. And I thought that I'm not going to do that. And I should have put down $25, Teddy.
You'll be watching the Daily Pulse on Friday.
Whatever Rudy says, I'm going there.
Thank you. Melanie, thanks, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow for another edition of the Daily Pulse. Till then, everybody stay safe. Get outside if you can. Enjoy this beautiful spring day where it might hit 80, they're telling us. And I'll catch you on the other side.